The unthinkable end of a god emperor. Let's get one thing straight. When you hear the title Emperor of Rome, you don't picture a man getting skinned alive and stuffed like a scarecrow to be shown off in another king's temple. You imagine marble statues, laurel crowns, gladiators shouting his name, not racks of flesh hanging like war trophies. But hey, history doesn't care about your expectations. And Emperor Valerian, he didn't get a grand funeral. He didn't even get a grave. What he got was peeled, packed, and displayed, like a luxury handbag made of trauma. Yeah, it's that bad. Valerian's death wasn't just brutal, it was personal, it was theatrical. It was psychological warfare dressed up as a death sentence. And the man behind it, Shapur, the Persian king, he didn't want to just beat Rome. He wanted to ruin its self-esteem. He wanted to grab the symbol of Roman greatness, its living emperor, and turn him into a flesh puppet. This story isn't about a lost battle, it's about a war for pride, a war of humiliation. And the most savage, you thought you were special, moment in imperial history. So why are we talking about this? Because no matter how high you climb, how powerful you become, there's always someone out there who doesn't just want to take your throne. They want to grind your face into the dirt, record it, and make it a national holiday. Valerian thought he was untouchable. Turns out he was very touchable and flayable, apparently. And if that doesn't make you want to buckle up for the rest of this ride, I don't know what will. So let's start from the top, before the knives, before the ropes, before the skin came off. Let's rewind to a Rome that was already crumbling, long before Shapur laid a single finger on it. Rome's house, on fire, crisis of the 3rd century. If Rome were a person in the 3rd century, it'd be that drunk uncle at a family party, ranting about how things used to be better, while his house burns behind him. This was the age of constant chaos. Plagues, civil wars, bankrupt treasuries, and emperors dropping like flies. Honestly, calling it a crisis feels polite. It was a full-blown existential meltdown. Between 235 and 284 CE, Rome went through over 20 emperors. Most of them didn't die of old age. They died of stab wounds and terrible luck. Being emperor back then, it was like wearing a bullseye as a fashion statement. So when Valerian stepped up in 253 CE, people were like, oh, thank the gods, an adult in the room with actual experience. And he was, to be fair. Valerian was old, stable, and knew how to run things. Senator, check. Governor, check. Didn't go mad with power in 5 minutes. Also check. He looked around at the empire, the riots, the border attacks, the inflation, and decided, yeah, I can fix this. Bless his optimism. He did have one smart move. He didn't try to do it all alone. He appointed his son Gallienus as co-emperor. Dad handles the eastern front. Son handles the western mess with Germanic tribes and collapsing frontiers. Divide and conquer. Seems logical, right? But here's the thing. While Rome was busy trying to plug leaks in every direction, a new problem was rising in the east. And this one wasn't some ragtag barbarian tribe. No, this was something organized, ambitious, and personal. Enter Shapur, King of Kings, Persia's big boss. Now, the previous Persian dynasty, the Parthians, they were chaotic, unfocused. Basically the we'll fight later type. But the Sassanids, different beast entirely. Shapur wasn't just a king. He was a strategist, a psychologist, a visionary. He wasn't trying to defend Persia. He wanted to rewrite the balance of power in the ancient world. And he knew exactly how to do it, not just by defeating Rome, but by humiliating it. Rome worshipped symbols, their eagles, their emperors, their shiny golden regalia. So Shapur didn't just want to take cities. He wanted to break the myth of Roman invincibility. And guess who just marched right into his backyard? Valerian, with the best Roman army in years, full of hope, full of pride. marching east like they were about to fix the whole problem in one big campaign. Spoiler, they weren't. In fact, they were about to walk into one of the most elegant, ruthless traps in ancient history. Because Shapur, he wasn't playing war, he was playing chess, psychological chess, with human pieces. And Valerian, he was the king on the board. Marching into the meat grinder. Let's set the scene. It's the year 256 CE. Rome is in flames, not literally, yet, but close enough. And Emperor Valerian. He's had enough of watching the empire fall apart like cheap pottery. So he gears up, not just to fight, but to restore Roman greatness. He's going east, baby. He's going to face the Sassanid Empire, a rising power, well-organized, highly motivated, and disturbingly competent. Not your average barbarian tribe with sticks kind of enemy. These guys had cavalry, siege weapons, state religion, and something worse than any sword. A king who knew how to play the long game. But we'll get to Shapur later. First, let's talk about Valerian's big entrance. This wasn't some last-minute campaign with a bunch of conscripted farmers. This was the real deal. He pulled troops from all across the empire. Seasoned veterans, elite units, the cream of the Roman crop. It was probably the last time Rome managed to assemble an army that actually looked impressive on paper. He even brought the shiny standards and a press kit. Valerian didn't just want to win, he wanted to send a message. Rome isn't done. Rome is eternal. Rome still F***S. And at first, he made it look easy. The Romans pushed into Mesopotamia. They relieved cities under siege. They reclaimed lost territory. They probably wrote a few gloating letters home. And for a hot minute, it looked like Valerian was about to be the hero Rome desperately needed. The one who would turn the tide, put Persia back in its place. And maybe, just maybe, leave behind a legacy that didn't end in screaming. But here's the twist. Shapur wasn't resisting. He wasn't falling back because he was scared. He was inviting the Romans in, smiling behind the curtain, letting them get comfortable. Because while Valerian was thinking in battles and victories, Shapur was thinking in months, disease cycles, and logistics breakdowns. He let the Romans get deep into Persian territory, far from their supply lines, far from reinforcements, far from anyone who could save them when things went south. And then the real war started. At first, it was little things, a food shipment that didn't arrive, a scout party that didn't come back, whispers among the troops about desert spirits and cursed lands. Then came the real killer, the plague of Cyprian, not a cold, not a flu, a full-blown, soul-sucking, empire-crippling epidemic. This plague was ripping through cities back in the west. But now it hit the army. Hard. Imagine thousands of soldiers, packed in tight, exhausted, marching in desert heat. And then the coughing starts. Fever, vomiting, death, no enemy in sight. Just the slow, creeping horror of watching your army rot around you. And Shapur, he didn't even have to lift a sword. He just watched it happen. He kept his distance, sent in scouts to harass supply lines, attacked a few convoys, kept the pressure steady, but never too much. He wanted them tired, not dead. He wanted them to keep moving. Into worse terrain, deeper into danger, deeper into hopelessness. Meanwhile, morale collapsed. Legions that once marched like machines started questioning everything. The gods, the emperor, the war, some probably deserted, some prayed, some just waited to die. And Valerian, he held it together, at least on the outside. Still believed he could turn it around. He wasn't totally wrong. He still had troops, still had status, still had options. But what he didn't realize was this. Shapur wasn't playing the same game. This wasn't about military victory. It was about psychological destruction. It was about feeding the Romans hope. Just enough to make the fall that much deeper. So when Valerian finally found himself surrounded, diseased, undersupplied, and trapped, he made a choice, a desperate one. and that decision would turn him from Emperor of Rome into Shapur's personal footstool. But that's a story for the next chapter. The Emperor who walked into a trap. So, your army's half dead from plague, you're low on food, you're surrounded, your men are looking at you like, do you have a plan, sir? And what does Emperor Valerian do? He calls for a meeting. Yep. Instead of charging out, in a final blaze of glory, Valerian sends word to Shapur, "Hey buddy, let's talk this out." Because somewhere deep down, Valerian still believed in diplomacy, in emperor-to-emperor etiquette. He thought his title meant something, that Shapur would respect the code. But here's the thing, Shapur didn't respect the code. Shapur wrote his own rulebook, in blood, so Valerian comes forward. Not alone, he brings a small group of high-ranking officers. Not an army, but enough to say, I'm still important, still powerful, still Roman. And Shapur plays along. He sets the stage. Neutral ground, ceremonial tents. Guards who look relaxed, but aren't. Valerian steps into the meeting, and that's when the trap snaps shut. One moment he's negotiating, the next, he's a prisoner just like that. No fanfare, no epic duel. No dramatic betrayal music. Just caught, clean, efficient, devastating. His guards overpowered. His officers captured or killed. Valerian himself dragged away in chains. This wasn't a defeat, it was a message. Shapur didn't want to kill Valerian on the battlefield. That would have been quick, honorable, boring. No, he wanted something far more powerful, a Roman emperor, alive and humiliated. Think about it. In Roman history, emperors don't get taken alive. They die in battle, they fall on their swords. They go out dramatically with a cool last line and heroic lighting. Valerian, he got none of that. No last stand, no glory. Just ropes and silence. And when word spread through the Roman ranks that their emperor had been captured, collapse. The legions panicked. Structure fell apart. Command chains disintegrated. Some fled. Some surrendered. Some probably stood there blinking, not knowing what the hell to do. Because if the emperor, the literal human embodiment of divine Roman power, was now a prisoner, then what the hell were they fighting for? This was the moment Rome stopped being scary and started being breakable. And Shapur, he knew exactly what he had just done. He didn't just win a battle. He ripped the spine out of Roman confidence, and he was only getting started. Because what came next, that wasn't conquest, it was theater, a long, drawn-out performance. And Valerian, he wasn't just the lead actor, he was the prop. The living trophy. Years of humiliation. So what do you do when you've captured the emperor of the biggest empire in the known world? You don't kill him. You don't ransom him. You don't even lock him away and throw out the key. You keep him alive, visible, vulnerable, and very, very useful. Because Shapur wasn't some brute with a big army and a bigger ego. He was a master of image, symbolism, psychological leverage. A man who understood that true victory isn't when your enemy dies, but when he lives long enough to represent everything you've destroyed. Valerian didn't get a dungeon. He got something far worse, a carefully choreographed descent into daily, state-sponsored humiliation. No torture chambers, no iron masks. Just small, constant, soul-shredding indignities, each one designed to tell the same story. Rome is broken. And this man is proof. First, they stripped him not just of weapons or armor, but of everything that said, I am emperor. The robes, the crown, the ceremonial everything. Gone, replaced with rags or worse, the plain tunic of a slave. He was no longer Imperator Caesar Publius Licinius Valerianus Augustus. He was just the footstool, literally. Every time Shapur mounted his horse, he stepped onto Valerian's back. Every time he received guests, the Emperor of Rome, the man who once ruled over millions, was kneeling at his feet, silent, motionless, reduced to furniture. Now, in a culture like Rome, where image was everything and pride was policy, this wasn't just personal. It was existential annihilation. Valerian wasn't being punished. He was being rewritten. He was no longer a person. He was a symbol, a very public, very pitiful reminder that no power lasts forever, and no man is immune to ritual degradation. And this went on for years. Shapur paraded him like a trophy. Artists sculpted the scene, Valerian groveling, Shapur towering. Scribes immortalized it in official records. Priests wove it into ceremony. Foreign diplomats visited Persia and went home whispering, "Did you see what they did to him?" It wasn't just propaganda. It was performance art, and Valerian was the centerpiece. He was fed, clothed, kept healthy, not out of mercy, but maintenance. Because a dead trophy has an expiration date, a living one that keeps speaking. And let's not forget the forced participation in Zoroastrian rituals, alien to Roman beliefs, sacrilegious to a man raised on Jupiter and Mars, and the divine cult of the emperor. Some say Valerian was made to bow before fire altars. Others claim he was paraded during purification rites meant to cleanse Persia of Roman corruption. Was it religious cleansing, political theater? Both. Honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters is this: the Emperor of Rome had become a full-time actor in someone else's national myth. And Shapur, he took his time. He let the world see it. He let Valerian live it every single day, waking up to the echo of what he used to be and the nightmare of what he had become. And still, Shapur wasn't done, because humiliation has levels, and the final one would be carved not in words or rituals or paintings, but in flesh. Flayed alive, the final ritual. There comes a moment, even in the most twisted of games, when the show must end. After years of using Valerian like a prop in a propaganda machine, Shapur knew the emperor's time was running out. He was getting old, weaker, slower. Maybe the sickness caught up. Maybe his body had finally started giving out under the weight of daily degradation. But make no mistake, Shapur wasn't going to let him fade quietly into the shadows of history. No, this man had been preserved, displayed, weaponized. And now he would be destroyed, publicly, methodically, and symbolically. Because for Shapur, death wasn't the finale. Death was the climax of a perfectly orchestrated ritual, one he had been preparing for years. And it started with a decision as chilling as it was precise. Valerian would be flayed, alive, and conscious. Now let's pause and be clear. Flaying isn't just execution, it's deconstruction. It's peeling a human being apart layer by layer while their mind is still inside, still trapped, still screaming. But for Shapur, this wasn't simply cruelty. It was spiritual. In Zoroastrian tradition, or at least how Shapur spun it, the act of removing the skin represented a kind of purification. A way to strip away corruption, cleanse sacred land, rid the world of pollution, and in this case, the pollution was Rome. Valerian's body in that context wasn't just flesh, it was imperial contamination. And so, the ritual began. First, his body was prepared, washed, shaved, treated with oils, not to comfort him, but to make the skin easier to cut. He wasn't tied down in a dungeon. He was likely laid out in view of witnesses. Persian nobles, priests, maybe even foreign envoys invited to watch the spectacle. Because again, this wasn't just punishment, it was political theater, and Shapur wanted a full house. The executioners, trained, precise. Professionals in the art of keeping a man alive for as long as the ritual demanded. They started with the extremities. Fingers, toes, face, the parts most expressive. To break down not just the body, but the identity. Every cut was slow, deliberate, agonizing, the kind of pain that doesn't come in waves. It builds, multiplies, until the only thing louder than the screams is the silence in between them. And through it all, Valerian lived. Long enough to feel it, to know what was happening. to realize that even his death had been stolen, transformed into a grotesque display of domination. He didn't die like a soldier. He didn't die like a god. He died like an offering. When the end finally came, likely from shock, or blood loss, or maybe just surrender, Shapur still wasn't finished. The skin, yes, his literal skin, was then cleaned, treated, and preserved. Not buried, not burned, preserved, stuffed. Draped over straw or soft materials to hold its shape. Dressed in imperial regalia, mock versions of the robes Valerian once wore. And then put on display in a temple, in a palace. In front of ambassadors, traders, rival kings, visiting generals. Everywhere it was seen, it said the same thing. This is what happens when you challenge Persia. It wasn't just a body, it was a message. A human billboard soaked in humiliation, stitched together with symbolism, and displayed like a religious relic of absolute domination. And in that moment, even after his screams had stopped, Valerian was still being used, still speaking, still screaming, and for Rome, it was the loudest silence in their entire history. Rome's collapse and Persia's glory, echoes of a Flayed empire. When news of Valerian's death reached Rome, it didn't come as a formal report. There was no messenger delivering a scroll sealed in wax, no battlefield summary, no official funeral. It came in rumors, and it came in shockwaves. Captured, they said. Still alive, they whispered. Then, later, flayed. At first, nobody believed it. How could they? No Roman emperor had ever been taken alive before, let alone turned into a leather effigy. The Senate didn't know what to do. Panic. Pretend it didn't happen. Spin it as fake news. They tried damage control. They called Valerian a martyr, a hero who died defending the East. They brushed off the humiliation, ignored the flaying. But lies don't stop bleeding. And once the details started leaking, it didn't take long for the cracks to open wide. Because this wasn't just the death of a man. This was the death of an illusion. For centuries, Rome had told itself a story, that emperors were gods in human form, that Roman power was unbreakable, that enemies could wound the empire, yes, but never humiliate it. And yet here it was, the ultimate symbol of Roman dominance, the emperor himself. Skinned, stuffed, and put on display like a hunting trophy in a Persian temple. How do you recover from that? Short answer, you don't. The psychological damage hit faster than any legion could regroup. Soldiers on the eastern frontier lost morale overnight. Discipline collapsed. Recruitment slowed. Desertions spiked. Commanders couldn't convince their men that Rome is eternal. While everyone knew the last emperor ended up as a glorified rug. And enemies, oh, they took note. Germanic tribes in the north suddenly grew bolder. African kingdoms pushed the southern borders. Everyone smelled blood, because if Persia could break the emperor, what was stopping anyone else? Inside the empire, chaos brewed. Rival claimants popped up like weeds. Regional generals stopped listening to Rome. Civil wars reignited. Gallienus, Valerian's son and co-emperor, was left scrambling to maintain control. He couldn't even retrieve his father's remains, let alone restore dignity. Diplomatic missions to recover Valerian's body were ignored, insulted, turned into public spectacles. Persian officials didn't just refuse to return the corpse. They showed off the skin, mocked the attempts, turned every Roman gesture into another moment of humiliation. And Shapur, he was basking in glory. Poets sang of his triumph. Artists immortalized the scene, Shapur on horseback, Valerian beneath his feet. Temples echoed with prayers thanking Ahura Mazda for delivering Rome's pride into Persian hands. Valerian became part of Persian national mythology, a story passed down not as history, but as proof of divine superiority. And the trophy, the skin, didn't rot in secret. It stayed on display for years, maybe decades. Some say it became a centerpiece in court rituals. Others claim it was brought out for festivals, paraded like a holy relic of imperial collapse. Whatever the truth, Rome knew about it, and that was the point. Valerian's body had been dismantled, but his defeat, it was carefully preserved, used again and again to shatter the psyche of a once invincible empire. Rome had suffered defeats before. But this was different. This was personal. This was viral. This was uncorrectable. You can rebuild cities. You can avenge battles. But how do you recover from being skinned in front of the world? You don't. You live with the scar. And in Rome's case, that scar bled for generations. The final lesson: power, skin, and the fragility of empire. So what are we left with? An emperor flayed alive, a skin stuffed with straw, a god-king turned into Persia's favorite conversation piece. But this story, it's not just ancient horror porn. It's not just about gore or shock or some guy losing an extremely one-sided fight. It's about the lie of invincibility, because Rome, for centuries, sold the world a fantasy. That power once claimed was permanent, that emperors were untouchable, that the empire was eternal, unbreakable, divine. And yet here we are, all that marble, all those legions, all that glory. And one man's torn-off skin made the whole world stop and ask, wait, is Rome actually just human? That's what made Shapur's move so genius and so terrifying. He didn't just kill Valerian, he redefined power. He understood something Rome had forgotten, that sometimes the symbol matters more than the sword. That one man's humiliation, if done right, can do more damage than 10 lost provinces. He turned Valerian's body into a story, a warning, a relic, and stories, they spread. They survive. They rot slowly and infect deeply. For the Romans who came after, Valerian's fate was a stain they couldn't scrub out. Future emperors refused to personally lead Eastern campaigns, not because they were cowards, but because they knew. If this could happen to Valerian, it could happen to anyone, and that's the lesson here. It's not that Shapur was cruel, it's that he was strategic. He saw the emperor not as a man, but as a symbol to be unmade, and unmake him he did. Not with swords, not with fire, but with slow, deliberate acts of psychological demolition, a public unraveling of identity, dignity, legacy, layer by layer, until there was nothing left but skin, literally. So what's the takeaway? That power is fragile, that reputation is paper-thin, that you are never too important to be turned into a message. Valerian ruled an empire, but he died a prop, a punchline, a parade item. And somewhere, deep in that Persian temple, his skin might have hung for decades, quietly reminding everyone who passed. This is what happens when you believe your own myth. Narrator, pause, softer now. The ruins of Rome still stand. So do the legends, the books, the statues, but the warning, the real warning, it's not carved in stone. It's not written in Latin. It's whispered quietly in the background of every empire that thinks it will last forever. They flayed their emperor, and they made him watch. Power and the final warning. And now we close the book, not just on Valerian's life, but on the illusion that power ever keeps you safe. Because if this story proves anything, it's this: no one is untouchable, not emperors, not empires, not gods wrapped in gold. Valerian didn't just die. He was reduced, piece by piece, layer by layer, until all that remained was a stretched skin in someone else's temple, used not as a body, but as proof. Proof that even the highest throne can lead to the lowest place on earth, or under it. And Shapur, he didn't just win a war, he shattered a belief system. He didn't kill Rome. He killed Rome's self-image. He proved to the world, in one perfectly executed performance, that even the great can be unmade if someone plays the game more cruelly, more patiently, and with a better understanding of how fear works. Because in the end, you can lead legions, wear crowns, and raise temples. But if one man figures out how to turn you into a story, you're no longer history. You're mythology. Tragic, grotesque, unforgettable mythology. And you become a lesson. You can rule the world, but if someone understands the crowd better than you do, you'll end up as a decorative warning in someone else's temple. So now I'll ask you, what would you have done if you were Valerian? Would you have fought, fled, thrown yourself on your sword, begged, or do you think you would have lasted longer before the skin came off? Tell me in the comments. Let's see who's honest. And if this story rattled your bones even a little, like it, share it, and subscribe for more tales of fallen gods and shattered empires. Because trust me, Valerian wasn't the only emperor who died horribly. He was just the one who got repurposed. History isn't written by the victors. Sometimes it's stitched together from the skin of the defeated.